The gold badge wasn't real gold, I knew that. Still, I polished it every morning like it meant something. It used to catch the light from my desk lamp right before I learned who actually had the power to make someone disappear without a trace. They gave me a nameplate before they gave me the title. That should have been the first red flag. It was clean, brushed metal, heavier than it needed to be, engraved with James Alden, regional team lead. Not interim, not acting, just the full thing like it had already happened. I remember holding it up under the break room lights like an idiot, trying to hide how proud I felt. I even took a photo of it resting on my desk, coffee ring and all, and texted it to my wife with a single caption: "We made it." That was 2 weeks before the lunch. 2 weeks before I watched my future get handed off behind a closed door I wasn't invited through. And it's funny because up until that point I thought I was in. I thought I was the guy. I work, or I did work, depending on how you define things, for a mid-sized logistics company headquartered in Des Moines. 47 employees in our branch. Warehouse in the back, admin and ops up front, open concept everything, cheap coffee, better than average dental. I'd been there 6 years, started in inventory support, moved to ops after my second year, then finally landed in logistics planning. It wasn't flashy, but I was good at it. Efficient, reliable, always on time. That's what they said during reviews. My old boss, Calvin, used to call me Mr. Margin because I could shave 0.5% off just by rewriting our freight calendar. When Calvin got promoted up to corporate, I was the logical next guy. At least, that's what he told me on his way out. "You're next," he said, shaking my hand in the hallway with that half-laugh he always did. "Just don't let the quarterly review monkeys trip you up." I remember standing there with that weird, punch-drunk smile on my face, feeling like a kid who'd just been told he could drive the car home. After he left, things moved fast. Bethany from HR pulled me into her office the next week. She handed me a paper folder, actual paper, not a DocuSign, and said the position was under discussion, but they wanted to see how I handled the next quarter. Trial run, leadership exposure, blah blah blah. I didn't argue. I said thank you. I stayed late. I covered for my team. I took on overflow reports that weren't even mine. The promotion wasn't guaranteed, but it felt like the kind of thing you only had to survive. Until the day of the lunch. It was a Thursday, gray outside with that clingy wet cold that soaks through your sleeves before you even make it to your car. I remember because I wore my only blazer, the navy one with the fraying threads near the inside pocket. I wasn't expecting a client meeting, but something about the day just felt like I should try a little harder. There was a buzz around the office that morning, not panicked, just tight, controlled. I walked into the planning pod and noticed Sheila had put on lipstick. She never wore makeup, not even during the annual party. Omar was wearing actual slacks. Even Dave, who usually dressed like an extra from a startup commercial, had buttoned his collar. Something was up. I asked around casually. "Big meeting today." "Just to check in with regional," Sheila said, smiling in that way people do when they're pretending not to know something. Her eyes dropped back to her spreadsheet before I could press. Then around 11:30 it happened. 3 people got up from their desks at once: Bethany from HR, Carol from finance, and Mike, my peer, my only peer in logistics planning. They walked toward the front, right past my desk. I didn't think much of it, maybe a department lead sync, but then I saw Bethany grab her coat. Carol was already holding a leather purse. And Mike, the kicker, he said, "See you in a bit," to nobody in particular, and followed them out the front door. No invite. No heads up. No, "Hey James, can you cover for a bit?" I sat there blinking at my dual monitors, wondering what kind of meeting happened off-site without the guy who was supposedly acting team lead. At 12:04, I checked the group calendar. Nothing, just private event, room reserved from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They came back around 2:15, laughed in the hallway. I heard Bethany say something about the crab cakes. Mike gave me a nod like we were in on the same joke. I just nodded back, because what else do you do? Later that day, I walked past Carol's office and saw a black folder sitting on her desk. It looked exactly like the one Bethany gave me when they first mentioned the promotion, only this one had Mike's name on the corner. I didn't even know she still printed documents. That night I went home quiet. My wife, Andrea, was in the kitchen heating up leftover curry. She asked me how my day went, and I told her it was just another Thursday. Then I poured a beer and stared at my inbox from my laptop while she watched a rerun of some baking show on mute. I kept refreshing. No email, no calendar change, no Slack message. Nothing. Friday came and went the same way. I asked Mike if there'd been any decisions made about team resourcing. He said, not yet, and then asked if I'd mind reviewing the updated allocations, the ones I usually assigned. I did it because that's what you do when you're waiting to be recognized. The following Monday, there was a meeting invite in my inbox. Subject line: reorg discussion, individual check-in. Attendees: me, Bethany, Mike. The doorknob to HR's office was always a little cold, but that Monday it felt like ice. I held it for half a second too long, like my body hadn't decided whether I was walking into a conversation or a firing squad. The reorg discussion meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m., but I showed up 5 minutes early. That's just how I am, first in, last out. I even knocked. Bethany opened the door with a flat smile. Her glasses were fogged slightly at the top, like she'd been rushing between rooms. Mike was already seated inside, legs crossed like he was getting fitted for a new suit. "Hey James," he said, tapping the empty chair across from him. "Glad you could make it." I didn't respond right away. I sat down, adjusted my cuffs, and kept my expression neutral. Inside, my stomach was turning over like it knew something I didn't. Bethany opened a slim leather portfolio and said, "Thanks for joining us. We'll try to keep this brief." She used a tone I hadn't heard before, something between customer service and condolences. "I wanted to loop you in personally," she began, "before the announcement goes out to the wider team." My heart started to slow in that strange, heavy way, like it had further to fall. Bethany continued, "As you know, we've been evaluating internal leadership realignments as part of the transition from Calvin's departure. After careful consideration and based on feedback from several stakeholders, we've decided to move forward with appointing Mike as the permanent regional team lead." There it was. Not a pause, not a "we appreciate your contributions," just straight to the point, like she was reading from a script. I didn't speak right away. I just looked at Mike, who gave me a small nod, like this was some civil transfer of power. I turned to Bethany. "Can I ask when this was decided?" Her mouth tightened slightly. The final decision was made Friday afternoon. The same day I submitted the Q2 freight analysis. She blinked once. "Yes. That was the analysis. I pulled a 14-hour day to finish." And I said, forcing my voice to stay even, "Was I ever seriously considered, or was I just keeping the seat warm?" Bethany shifted in her chair. "We appreciate everything you've done these past few months, James. Your support has been instrumental. But ultimately, we felt Mike's experience managing external vendor relationships gave him a broader scope of readiness for the role." That line felt practiced. I wanted to ask what broader scope of readiness even meant, but I knew how that game worked. Ask too many questions and suddenly you're not aligning with the company's evolving needs. I nodded slowly, swallowed. "Okay." Mike chimed in, too chipper for the moment. "We're hoping you'll stay on in your current role, James. Your stability really helps the team." My stability. Translation: we still want your output, just not your input. Bethany added, "Of course, we'll revisit compensation and role expectations during the next review cycle." Next review cycle was 4 months away. I stood up. "Thanks for letting me know." Bethany gave a small nod, like she thought the conversation had gone well. Mike held out a hand. I stared at it for half a beat, then shook it anyway. When I got back to my desk, my nameplate was still there. James Alden, Regional Team Lead. Nobody had bothered to take it down yet. I flipped it over so the name faced the desk, then I opened my inbox. At the top, unread, "Team Realignment Announcement, please read." I clicked it. It was boilerplate, full of buzzwords: excited to welcome Mike to this new chapter, gratitude for everyone's flexibility, change as a path to growth. My name wasn't mentioned. The funny thing was, nobody treated me differently at first. Omar still stopped by to ask about his leave schedule. Sheila still CC'd me on the shipment delay escalation. Even Dave came by with a spreadsheet and said, "Hey, I know you're still the go-to on this." But by Friday, the shift had started. Mike began hosting the team huddles, ones I used to run. He asked me to defer questions in meetings so he could speak holistically. He moved our shared folder to a new structure I didn't have edit access to. By Monday, I noticed my Slack permissions had changed. I could no longer add events to the logistics planning calendar. That same day, I got an email from it. Subject: transition of administrative rights, notification only. No action required, they said. That night, Andrea could tell something was off. I hadn't touched my dinner. Still thinking about the meeting, she asked. I just nodded, then said, you ever feel like someone handed you a race number but moved the finish line when you weren't looking? She smiled faintly, more times than I care to count. I just don't get it. I did everything right. Sometimes doing everything right doesn't mean you're the one they want. I didn't respond. I just picked at my rice and tried to act like I still had an appetite. By the end of that week, I started getting headaches. Real ones, tight, stretching behind the eyes, creeping down into my jaw. I kept a bottle of ibuprofen in my drawer and popped them like mints between meetings. I also started writing everything down. Every email, every directive Mike gave, every time I got excluded from a thread I should have been part of. It wasn't because I planned to sue or file a grievance. Not yet. It was just that I needed to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. On Wednesday, something odd happened. I was refilling my water bottle when Bethany approached me near the break room. Hey James, she said almost too casually. Got a sec? Sure. She glanced around like she didn't want to be seen, just wanted to say, I know the transition was abrupt, but I hope you know we really value your presence here. I gave her a polite smile, thanks. She lowered her voice. Off the record, I didn't vote for Mike. That caught me off guard. Then who did? Bethany hesitated. It came from higher up. Corporate wanted someone they could plug into vendor calls without onboarding time. Calvin endorsed him directly. That name hit like a slap. Calvin. The same Calvin who told me I was next. The same Calvin who handed me my fake promotion like a prize inside a cereal box. After she walked away, I sat down at my desk and stared at my blank notepad. That was the moment something shifted in me. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was betrayal. The kind that lingers under your skin, whispering that maybe, just maybe, you were never in the race at all. Can you loop James in on that later? Mike said without looking at me, like I was just a temp, like I wasn't sitting 5 feet away already taking notes on the meeting he hijacked from my calendar. 2 weeks had passed since the transition. I'd stopped calling it a promotion. That word tasted fake now, too clean, too professional. What happened to me didn't belong in a PowerPoint slide. It belonged in a warning label. Every morning I still showed up at 8 sharp, coffee in hand, button-up pressed. My nameplate stayed flipped over. I didn't touch it. I didn't trash it either. Some part of me wanted to leave it there as a dare, let them be the ones to throw it away. The meetings got worse. At first, Mike would pretend to include me, James, want to add anything, but only after he'd already steamrolled the topic. His slides, his ideas, his tone. Then came the silence. Meeting invites stopped including me at all. A recurring Thursday sync I created and hosted for over a year disappeared from my calendar without a word. I only found out it was still happening when I walked past the small glass meeting room and saw my whole team huddled inside. Mike at the front, gesturing at a chart I built. I stood there for a second too long, long enough for Dave to glance up and freeze mid-scribble. Our eyes met through the glass. He looked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades blur until they disappeared. Andrea turned over and whispered, "Still nothing." I shook my head. She didn't say anything after that. She just reached for my hand and held it under the covers. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I made an appointment with a recruiter. His name was Kellen, some guy Andrea's coworker recommended. Young, sharp, wore expensive shoes and used phrases like growth trajectory and pivot capacity way too much. We met at a downtown coffee shop. He ordered a matcha latte and didn't touch it once. I told him my background, my time at the company, my skill set. He nodded, occasionally tapping notes on a tablet. So, he said, leaning in, "Why are you looking now? What changed?" I looked out the window, thought about how to answer that without sounding bitter. Then I just said it. They gave the job to someone else. That I trained, that I supported, that I covered for on his mistakes. Kellen tilted his head. Internal politics. No, I said, internal loyalty. I had it, they didn't. The next Monday, something strange happened. Mike was late. Like visibly late, 10 minutes past 9, no call, no message, just no show. Which wouldn't have mattered except our department was hosting a cross-functional huddle with finance and inventory. 30 people, all sitting in the big conference room with blank stares, waiting for direction. Silence. And then from the back, Bethany looked at me. James, she said, you're familiar with the quarterly sync, right? I nodded slowly. I built the deck for it. She smiled tightly. Would you mind stepping in? I stood, walked up to the front, picked up the remote. The slides were already loaded, mine from last quarter, just with Mike's name on the title page. I clicked through like nothing had changed. I answered questions, took notes, assigned follow-ups. People nodded, took photos of the projections, thanked me after. For 30 minutes, it felt like I had my job back. Then Mike walked in holding a smoothie. Sorry, he said loudly, traffic on the loop. He didn't look at me, just sat down like he'd been there the whole time. That night something cracked. Andrea and I were eating spaghetti on the couch when I said, I think I'm done. She blinked. Done. With waiting, with pretending this is temporary, with watching someone else get paid to run the engine I built. She didn't try to talk me out of it. She just asked, what are you going to do? And I said, not sure yet, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to spend another year getting passed over while being told I'm instrumental. She nodded, then said something that stuck with me. You don't need their title to be worth more than you already are. I started slow. Polished my resume, updated my LinkedIn, reached out to 3 old coworkers who'd left the company, people I trained, people who still spoke highly of me. One of them, Amber, was now managing operations at a competing logistics firm. She messaged me back the same day. Lunch next week, I might have something for you. It felt like a light cracking through all the gray. Back at work, things kept unraveling. Mike started reassigning projects without consulting me. He asked Omar to take point on a vendor account I'd nurtured for a year. He pulled Dave into a one-on-one and handed him a report I usually owned. By the end of that week, I wasn't just sidelined, I was erased. Except for one thing. The team still came to me. Quietly, casually, like in the hallway or over Slack DMs. Hey James, do you know where the old shipment tracker is? James, quick question, are we still running the 2-week lead for bulk orders? Did you hear about the vendor delay? Mike said not to escalate yet, but I'm nervous. They still trusted me. They still saw me. Which made what happened next all the more infuriating. Friday afternoon, 2:30. I was reviewing an old vendor contract when Bethany's name popped up on Slack. James, can you step into HR for a few minutes? No reason, no context. I stood, walked past the break room, past Carol in finance who didn't meet my eyes. Inside the HR office, Mike was already seated. Bethany gestured to the chair. I sat. She cleared her throat. We've had some concerns. My jaw tightened. Concerns. Mike jumped in. There's been some confusion about reporting lines. Some team members are still treating you as the lead. I blinked because I'm the one who trained them and supported them, and Bethany cut in. It's creating tension, James. We need to be aligned on structure. I stared at them both. You're telling me to step back from helping my team because it's making the actual lead look bad. Bethany didn't answer directly. She just said, we'd like you to focus on your core responsibilities, no more side direction, let Mike run point. I didn't speak, not right away. Then I leaned forward and said something I didn't plan. Then you better start preparing, because the only core responsibility I'll be focusing on now is leaving. Bethany's eyes flickered. Are you resigning? No, I said, not yet, but let's just say your timeline just got a lot shorter. I stood. Walked out. The door made a clean, hollow click behind me. It was 7:38 a.m. on a Tuesday when I unlocked my desk drawer for the last time. The office lights hadn't even flickered on yet. The badge scanner clicked like usual, but the room didn't feel the same. Because this time I wasn't here to work, I was here to leave clean. The moment I stepped out of that HR meeting, something inside me stopped trying to hold it all together. I wasn't angry anymore, not the hot kind anyway. It was colder than that, calmer, like ice slowly cracking under pressure. It doesn't roar, it just shifts. After that conversation, I gave myself a single rule: no outbursts, no revenge plays, just clean, quiet exits, strategic ones. By the end of that day, I updated every document I owned, organized the legacy files, cleaned up shared drives that didn't even have my name on them anymore. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of saying I went out sloppy. The next morning, I had coffee with Amber. We met at a tucked-away diner near the rail line. She slid into the booth wearing a gray blazer and that same no-nonsense smirk she always had when we worked together. "Still allergic to creamers?" she asked, sliding me a black coffee before I could answer. "Some things never change. Except titles, apparently." That made me laugh, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel forced. She got down to it quickly, no fluff. "James, I'm not just here for nostalgia. I've got an ops coordinator role opening up next month. Higher pay than what you're making now, better hours, and I trust you more than anyone I've interviewed." I blinked seriously. She nodded. "But it's not just a handout. You'd need to step in and stabilize a team that's been through 2 managers in 6 months. Think you're up for it?" I didn't even hesitate. "I'm ready." She smiled. "Good, then this lunch is officially a pre-onboarding meeting." Back at the office, I kept it quiet. Did my job, didn't interfere, let Mike take full credit for Q2 planning, even though I'd done most of the back-end modeling before I was transitioned. When Andrea asked why I hadn't quit yet, I told her the truth. Because I want to leave the place better than I found it, for the people who still believe I was more than a placeholder. That meant finishing a few things: rewriting the vendor SOP manual, cleaning the bulk freight logs, and consolidating the client feedback data, something Mike had completely forgotten to do. The week before I planned to give notice, I printed everything out. Labeled, indexed, neat folders stacked on the far end of my desk. When Dave walked by and noticed, he frowned. "You organizing for someone?" I smiled. "Just future-proofing. You never know when someone might need to step in." He looked at me for a long second, then said, "We're gonna miss you, aren't we?" The day I resigned, I didn't make a show of it. No long goodbye speech, no drama. I simply scheduled a one-on-one with Bethany and handed her a single sheet of paper. She read it, blinked. "You're really leaving?" "Yes." "Where are you going?" "Somewhere that didn't forget who I was." The second someone else smiled wider. Bethany nodded slowly. She didn't try to talk me out of it. But she did ask one thing. "Would you consider doing an exit interview?" I looked at her, then said, "Only if you let me tell the truth." The interview was scheduled for the next day. It lasted 45 minutes, and I didn't hold back. I told her everything. The misleading title. The trial run that was really just free labor. The private lunch. The erasure. The slow corporate ghosting that followed. Bethany listened without interrupting, occasionally wrote things down. Once she actually winced. When I finished, I stood up and said, I used to think loyalty was rewarded. Turns out it's just a longer fuse for people to light." She looked tired. "James, I'm sorry." "I believe you," I said, "but you're not the one who needs to say it." On my last day, I came in early one final time. I left everything clean. Folders stacked. Files renamed. Instructions emailed. My nameplate still flipped over. I finally picked up and placed it in the top drawer, left the drawer unlocked. On the back of one of the folders, I left a sticky note addressed to Mike. "You inherited a system you didn't build. Don't break it pretending you did." I didn't sign it. That afternoon, I walked out for the last time. No party, no speech, no company-wide send-off email. But as I passed by the break room, I saw something taped to the fridge. It was a printed-out version of my freight projection chart. Sharpied across the top, in Dave's handwriting, was a note. "Built by James, used by everyone." That one hit me harder than I expected. I started at Amber's company 2 weeks later. The first day, she introduced me to the team with a line I'll never forget. This is James. He's here to fix what others couldn't. The room clapped. It was small, casual. But it meant more than anything I ever got in 6 years at my last job. A month later, I got a LinkedIn notification. Mike had posted a photo, him holding a manager of the quarter plaque standing next to Bethany and Carol. His caption, "Success is a team effort." I scrolled past it. Didn't comment. But later that night, Andrea found me smiling at my laptop. "What's that look for?" she asked. I turned the screen toward her, an email from Amber. Subject, director position, opening discussion, let's talk. And all I said was, "I think I just got my title back." If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.